Greetings to you all fellow travelers. This is Krotnip, welcoming you all back to the logbook of a simple lindworm traveler. In today's episode we will be singing the sagas of the heroes once more. This time it's going to be my trusty Northern Tribes against my friend Tanan's Scions of Yaldabaoth. Today we are continuing my and Tanan's journey through the Interplanetario 2025 adventures, and we are now working with the adventure number 3. Both me and Tanan are also in the process of prepping for Finland's first Warcrow event, a one-day 3-round tournament coming in early November, but then again this is going to be more of an introduction type event than a very competitive one, so not trying to work out the optimal list for kicking behinds in this one, I think. Today's game was intended for reporting all along, unlike the last time around, so we should be more or less good to go. Today's scenario is Consolidated Progress. In this one there are 5 objective markers, as you can see from the table. They are forming this almost like a lightning shape across the board, which means that there's going to be more action on one flank of each player and then down the middle, and then the quadrants with no objectives effectively on them should probably see way less action unless a deep flanking operation is taking place. At the end of each round, the company that controls the middle objective gains a single military point. If you have managed to protect both of your objectives, your colored objectives on your side of the table, you will receive a single military point. And if you manage to snatch the further away enemy objective, the one that's touching the deployment zone, then you will be getting an additional military point. So a optimal round will see you score 3 military points. The interesting and important part about this scenario, I feel, is the role of the friendly objective closer to the midline of the table. Because yes, there are some points invested or in you taking that objective, but only in the case that you don't secure the further objective also. Because securing the objective numbered 1 in the map before you does not actually grant you any points per se. It will only deny your opponent from getting their military point, and if you are also capturing the objective number 2, the one next to your opponent's deployment zone, then capturing of the objective number 1 is a moot point essentially. So probably you will be wanting to invest as many resources as possible into capturing the objective number 2 and falling back on capturing objective number 1 if that becomes unattainable. Then again, if we are talking about 2 very equally matched battle lines and maneuver cannot be gained through, for example, scouting, ambushing or other means, then it might be simply a tug of war between the objective number 1s and the middle objective. Making a return to the channel is the Decapitation feat, and this one is all about hunting down a couple of important enemy targets while at the same time protecting your own. Each force's commander, that is the leader of their company, has to fight solo for the duration of this battle, and there is a hefty arcane point bounty on their head, so to speak. If a player manages to eliminate their opposing commander, not only will they gain 2 arcane points for themselves, but they will also deny their opponent a single arcane point. So that's gained from keeping your commander alive, so that's essentially a 3 command point swing right there. In addition to this, each player gets to pick a single opposing unit that has been deployed by the end of the deploy scouts phase as their bounty, and eliminating this bounty will also secure you a single arcane point. So in the very most extreme scenario, you can gain as many as 4 arcane points from this feat while denying your opponent access to any. Okay, let's get down to the companies involved. Today's list for me, titled Pack Hunters, is a list that's basic concept is to bring full availability Warc Riders and the Mounted Wrathmane for the maximum amount of mounted troops that a Northern Tribes company can include. The rest of the company is constructed to facilitate scenario play and to support the far-ranging and hard-hitting Warc Riders and their fearless commander. The trusty double scout detachment that I have been running of late makes a return. That is Thunder Marauders with the Hersir and the Orc Hunters with the Dark Master. Then when I add the extremely quick maneuverable Warc Riders in 2 units and the Mounted Wrathmane, that doesn't leave me more than 35 points left, and I have chosen to invest these points in a Orc Hunters unit with the Wise Mane. I feel this is a combination that I can leave to guard a objective in my backline. They should be able to outfight any ambushers or scouts that drop in, and as a unit that's fearless and it can be pushed back when defeated in combat, thanks to the Wise Mage special abilities, they should be quite reliable at this guard duty, and I can press them into service as offensive infantry later in the game should that become necessary. As you can see, there aren't all that many command tokens for me to spend in this company. The Mounted Wrathmane brings 2 and Hersir brings 1, and that's it. So I'm looking to go into the initiative role at a disadvantage, and I won't be leveraging my command abilities all that many times during the game. Then again, with Hersir having access to the Berserker Rage for his unit, thanks to die killing, I'm not expecting having to rely on those command tokens to trigger not one step back all that regularly, which only leaves my Mounted Wrathmane to use Wrath Roar or my Wise Mane to fix some dice with command tokens. So I think 3 will be plenty for this one. Here's the Scions of Yaldabaoth company for today's game. As you can see, Tanan has gone for a totally different style of list from me, and this is something that I really love about Warcrow. The list construction, the company construction mechanics at play allow us to create wildly different types of companies that are going for wildly different types of things, and I do feel that this company in particular shows that Tanan is finding his feet in this game, and I'm now seeing some of his his thought processes and his excellent knack for these types of things that I have witnessed in other games also transported into the Warcrow scene. The beating heart of this list is obviously Nuada and the anointed unit following him around. Nuada is absolutely terrifying, a beatstick that can essentially duel pretty much anything that's out there as of right now, and unless the opponent is able to bring him down in a single round, usually by inflicting damage when Nuada attacks and then finishing him off in the active turn, he's practically unkillable in his current configuration of rules. There is always the possibility of simply him using a command token to activate Liquid Orichalcum to heal all his wounds, remove all his states, and remove all his stress also. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't think this skill is going to make it through the general release of Nuada in this configuration. It simply makes it impossible to stick damage on Nuada over any longer period of time. It makes it impossible to crowd control him also, or at least next to impossible, that is. And the fact that the Scions of Yaldabaoth have their own very generous tinge roll table means that Nuada can take 6 tinge, I think 7 tinge even, without actually usually suffering any important negative consequences. The one thing is really that there is a roll there that gives him slowed, and that's pretty much the worst that can happen, so there's that. He can also bring back troops thanks to his Bloodsucker Poniard ability, and he brings 3 command tokens to the table, so what's not to love really. The second part of this main combat element of this company is obviously the Anointed with the first Anointed attached. Shout out Obiscus, this is a combination that he was also recommending for Science players out there. What this combination gives you is a surprisingly affordable package that costs only 60 points, quote unquote only 60 points. And the first Anointed being an officer type character, it means that losing a single Anointed from the unit will not impair their performance in any way. The first Anointed also brings to the unit a powerful solid special switch both on the offensive and on the defensive that adds blocks to the roll, and probably most importantly he brings 2 points of morale to the unit, additional points of morale, which puts the Anointed into whopping morale 4. This means that Nuada can move along quite speedily, in fact, and as long as he remembers to tether the Anointed, stay within 5 strides of them before making his last move, the Anointed can then subsequently trigger Guardians of the Family, take a point of stress and place themselves next to Nuada over and over and over again. And unless the opponent is willing to spend the resources to inflict stress on the Anointed, they can simply keep doing this over and over again with little to no danger of going full on stress. The secondary combat element of this company is a unit of gobblers that's accompanied by a Rumpy Ride. And this is a combination that Danan had theory crafted for this time around, and he was extremely happy to use. While this combination of troops is quite expensive, 75 points, it does allow Danan to field a Conquest 3 scout unit that can displace 3 at the start of each round in order to get a charge on stuff or to occupy important positions on the field. The Rumpy Ride can bring back a single gobbler per activation with a command token spent, and the entire unit can also be returned to the field should they get wiped out, so there is some crazy recursion game going on there. As this list is packing whopping 8 command tokens and it doesn't have all that many ways of usually spending them, you are probably earmarking 2 or at most 3 for Nuada's Liquid Orichalcum. You can pretty much resurrect a gobbler each time you are activating this unit combo with little to no negative effects, so that's pretty great, and I think that's a good idea of Danan's to leverage all those command tokens through this unit throughout the game. The gobblers are also capable of inflicting slowed upon their enemies, and Nuada can then use the emotion, I think it's frustration, to grant the gobblers additional 2 successes on both their ranged attack and melee attack rolls against those slowed enemies, so that's pretty great. The last 60 points in this company, Tanan has chosen to invest in a unit of echoes accompanied by the needle. Echoes are a tremendously durable A unit, especially when one chooses the aspect of the defender from memories or echoes of the ancient empire ability, which brings the echoes to 4 wounds a pop, attach the needle and their 5 wounds a pop. The passive ability also ups the echoes into Conquest 2, needle gets them to Conquest 3, and then they are also immovable. So inflicting damage upon the echoes is extremely difficult, and the needle has quite good a chance of returning any lost models to play, thanks to her assemble bodies tinge skill. The echoes are also more than capable of dishing out enough damage to deter any weak units from trying to backcap around them, and they can finish off some stronger units in melee also. We had a bit of a brainstorming session after the game, considering options for this module, but for the points and the list type that Tanan is running, we didn't think that there was, at least as of right now, a better option out there. As you can see, when compared to my company, Tanan's is running a very limited amount of tactical elements, but they are high morale, high performance units that he can run hot round to round, and we are going to be seeing him leverage this to quite excellent and effect going forward. Here is the table for today's game. We have a couple of dense forests there to block line of sight and be rugged terrain for golems and cavalry, except obviously, just kidding, the Warg Riders and the Mounted Wrathmane have preferred terrain rugged, so they really don't mind about the forests at all. Then we have 2 structures, a ruined tower and a tomb there, and these block line of sight and are impassable. We have a single large piece of ruins that's rugged and provides cover black. Then we have a impassable lake, some walls scattered about giving cover blue, and some fences that provide cover black. You can also see the objectives, in this instance being deployed on the right hand side of the table, and the conquest area markers underneath, so that it's easy to spot when a unit is in the capture area and when they are not. And off to the deployment we go. We roll for initiative, and thanks to the advantage given by the copious amount of command tokens that the Scions have access to, the Scions of Yaldabaoth win the initiative roll and Tanan chooses to keep initiative. I then get to choose the table edge, and I choose to deploy on the southern side of the map you see before you. I start by deploying my stay-at-home orc hunters to defend my back objective, and Tanan responds in kind with his echoes. We then trade character attachment deployments, me by placing my Wisemane, and then Tanan replies by placing his needle. Next I have to do some more important deployments, and I choose to deploy my first unit of Warg Riders pretty close to the middle of the table, thinking that their extremely high speed will allow them to either flank left, go straight for the middle objective, or even counter attack anything that's threatening my right flank. Tanan then places Nuada next to the echoes, ready to gun for the center line if necessary, and I then continue by placing my Mounted Wrathmane next to my Warg Riders. To the surprise of absolutely no one, the Anointed deploy right next to Nuada, which just leaves my second unit of Warg Riders to take the other side of my Mounted Wrathmane. Tanan's final normal deployment placement is going to be his First Anointed, who joins his two more bog standard compatriots. With all the standard deployments done, it's time to go for the scouts. I go first and I place my Dark Master accompanied Orc Hunters right next to the edge of Tanan's deployment zone in a position from which I can go for either of his backline objectives, but they are not within the charge range of the echoes from the get-go. Next, Tanan places his gobblers and the attached Rampy Ride, and I fail to take advantage of the sharp intuition or sharp perception here, So I would have been able to now redeploy my Orc Hunters in a more defensive formation, and this is most definitely something that I should have done, but for some reason I did not take note of the fact that this sharp perception allowed extra movement is one of the key reasons why I'm bringing this model all along, and now I fail to take use of it, so bad on me. Next I deploy my Tundra Marauders and Hersir behind the Orc Hunters. This pair of scout units is very much the hammer and the anvil, the Orc Hunters being preferably the anvil because they are quite hard to inflict meaningful damage on, and then the Tundra Marauders being the more fragile one but the more maneuverable one and the one capable of doing double attacks should be the one who comes in swinging after the Orc Hunters have taken the first blow. But now that I have not taken advantage of my sharp perception, I am unable to shield the Tundra Marauders from what's about to happen. So a strike on me, I suppose. It's time to assign our bounties as per the feat of Decapitation. In Decapitation, we are supposed to be going for our opponent's commander, their leader. So obviously Nuada and the Mounted Wrathmane are the targets that we are going for respectively. But speaking of strikes, this is strike 1 on Tanan because he assures me that you're supposed to pick your bounties before you deploy your scout units, and I'm too lazy to check, even though we have already played this adventure or this feat once before, and we actually do it wrong. You are actually supposed to deploy your scouts first, and that would have given me the ability to choose the gobblers as my bounty, because taking them out at least once during the game should be way more easy than what I eventually have to go for under the false pretenses that we are playing now, and I have to choose the needle essentially. She's the only realistic pick that I can get, because there's no point choosing the echoes, since the last echo will die after the needle if it ever comes down to that. Killing 2 anointed seems unrealistic also, and choosing the first anointed is entirely pointless because he's an officer, so he would be going down last anyways. Tanan then understandably chooses my Wisemane within the Orc Hunters, pretty much probably thinking along the same lines that he's the softest target available. I would imagine that had we chosen our bounties after deployment of scouts, he might have chosen, for example, the Tundra Marauders as the bounty to go for. But hey, we are going to be playing the game this way, and any decisions resulting from these changes are the change of bounties as they should have been is beyond the scope of what we are going to be doing here today. Alright, let's get down to the action, shall we? The round 1 starts with the gobblers being able to displace forward thanks to Anxious Mob, and this gives them a clear charge on my Tundra Marauders. I think that yes, I would have very much preferred them to have to engage my Orc Hunters, but this is also okay. I have enough experience with the type of list that I'm playing, to know that I won't be able to activate all the units all the times I would want to anyway. So if the Tundra Marauders take enough damage to become combat ineffective, I should have more than enough options left for me to activate, so that's quite acceptable. We have a friend of ours who's learning the ropes, watch the game and participate in that way, and he's quite surprised and amused by the amount of activations we are about to spend fighting our scouts against one another on this flank instead of advancing our quote-unquote main battle lines. But then again, historically many of the battles have started with the skirmisher type units duking it out before the main lines contact, so I think that's pretty accurate depiction of what fantasy combat might be like. We have a discussion, me and Tanan, about the strength of various scout units available in the game, and I can see that the Cobblers plus the Rumpy Ride combination is a strategic or list building tool that Tanan has elected to use because he has become aware of my fondness of running scout heavy lists, and he's looking to create a combination that is cost and activation effective way of countering the threat posed by scouts, and he sets upon completing this tactic going forward. Tanan rightfully concludes that engaging the Orc Hunters is not going to be worth it. The Dark Master provides them with an automatic block. They are rolling double black and a green defensive dice also, and Shrouded in Darkness means that any unit attacking the Dark Masters or Hunters in melee will suffer the disarmed state, which will reduce their damage even further. So instead, Tanan chooses to go for the softer target and he engages the Tundra Marauders. I have sung the praises of the Tundra Marauders and the attached Hersir to a great extent, and I do really love this unit combination from the bottom of my heart, but at the same time I do need to concede the fact that they are defensively quite weak, because the Hersir does not offer any defensive benefits to the unit, pretty much beyond being able to inflict the disarm chain just state as a switch based tool for when fighting. So here the Tundra Marauders simply have to rely on their own natural defense roll, and they take a casualty as a result. The Gobblers are also able to inflict the slowed state upon the unit, which is going to become important since Nuada has chosen the dominant emotion. I think it's frustration, that grants 2 additional successes on any red cap units attacking slowed units. Both me and Tanan are clearly aware of the fact that the first order of business is trying to limit the amount of activations each of us can get out of our scout units by putting as much stress on them as possible, and inflicting damage is very much a secondary objective at this point. I consider whether I should activate the Tundra Marauders to potentially charge the Gobblers, even though this would deny me the ability to do a double activation on them, but it would clear the slowed state, making the Marauders less susceptible to damage coming in from the Gobblers going forward. But in the end I decide it's not going to be worth it. I want to push some damage through assuredly, so that I can cause a point of stress on the Gobblers. My fear being that if I charge in with the Marauders and I roll poorly, I may not be able to inflict a point of stress on the Gobblers, and that would be catastrophic at this point of the game. So instead I choose to activate the Orc Hunters. I cause enough damage on the Gobblers to cause that important point of stress, and I also inflict the vulnerable state on them for whatever that's worth. There is no way for me to stop the gobblers from disengaging, however, so thanks to the tiny rule they are able to simply move away from melee with my orc hunters without suffering an attack of opportunity. Then again, me keeping the gobblers engaged at the end of the combat meant that they were unable to charge the Tundra Marauders and thus deal more damage, and rather moving to disengage will force them to rely on their weaker ranged attack for damage during this activation. I have also managed to inflict a point of stress on the gobblers. They are about to, or they now take a second point for activating a second time during this round, and the next time I'm able to inflict stress on them will that should render them unable to activate unless they are willing to spend an entire activation resting. Unfortunately for me, the gobblers roll quite hot on their dice for their ranged attack, and the Tundra Marauders roll pitifully for their defense, and this means that I take high amount of casualties on the unit. I think the last Tundra Marauder is left on 1 wound. This is unfortunate, since it means that I'm 1 wound away from losing that 2 points of conquest, as well as the extra mobility that the snow leopard tattoo is now granting to my Hersir, but at the same time my orc hunters are still in full power, and now I can simply shift my plan going forward to leaning on other units more for combat performance, and I'm going to be trying to save the last Tundra Marauder so that I can use the unit as a maneuver element and an element for capturing backline objectives should that become necessary. So heavy casualties, yes, but acceptable casualties nonetheless. Next order of business for me is to put the gobblers full on stress so that they should be unable to activate going forward. I'm able to achieve this and inflict some casualties in the meantime, thanks to being able to leverage the vulnerable state that I have inflicted on the gobblers on the previous activation. Tiny is usually a great way of mitigating damage coming from enemy units attacking the gobblers, but thanks to the fact that I'm charging with the orc hunters once again, there is no need for me to worry about Tiny, because I, as the active player, get to choose in which order the rerolls take place. So I roll my first attack roll, then I ask Tanan, do you want to apply Tiny on any of my rolls that include successes, and after he has done this, then I choose to reroll all my dice thanks to the attack reroll, effectively bypassing Tiny in the most important or the Tiny's most important effect. Yes, that effectively denies me the charge attack reroll because I have to spend it on overcoming Tiny, but either way. It's a tough choice for me afterwards whether I want to push back the gobblers or not. If I stay engaged, that leaves the orc hunters options more limited. And if Tanan is later able to engage them without me having moved them first, I'm going to be losing a dice or an automatic symbol from my roll thanks to being engaged by multiple enemy units. But then again, if I choose to push back the gobblers, then that will grant Tanan the ability to rest with them. In the end, I choose to push back the defeated enemy, thinking that I feel like I'm an activation behind, because I've had to spend this activation to put the gobblers full on stress. So I do want to make Tanan do the rest activation if that's indeed what he's going to be going for going forward. With no ability to use the gobblers at this point, except to rest, Tanan makes the decision to develop the position of Nuada and as a result also the Anointed. Tanan is annoyingly good at using this combination. First, he moves Nuada to be just within 5 strides of the Anointed during the first part of his move. Then he does a second short action skill move and moves again, then triggers the defenders of the family on the Anointed and teleports them, effectively places them next to Nuada. And with the first Anointed, the unit can take as much as 4 stress, so essentially they are always moving with Nuada no matter what. And Tanan has also been finding quite innovative ways of either shielding Nuada with this unit or even engaging enemy units next to Nuada by placing them in base-to-base contact. At this point, my morale 2 hunters can still take a point of stress on them, and since I feel there is no urgent need for me to advance my cavalry units, let alone my backline orc hunters, I choose to use them at this point, thinking that if Tanan is about to charge them, as he might, I'm going to be taking that point of stress anyway, so I might as well make it do some work for me. Attacking the gobblers isn't going to leave a long-lasting mark on Tanan's force, I'm afraid, because with 8 command tokens he can simply keep bringing them back and back and back, but at the same time inflicting damage is a way of trying to burn some of those command tokens that Tanan has, and I'm getting to push back my enemy and take up more position on the or occupy more real estate on the field by driving my orc hunters deeper. So that's what I'm going for over here. Me having pushed back the gobblers, again, thanks to the logic that I was using before, now gives Tanan access to the rest activation. He chooses to rest with the gobblers, shedding all of their stress, repositioning them back a bit to defend the objective and ready to go for the middle objective should that become necessary. And he also uses the command skill on the Rumpy Ride to bring back a gobbler to the unit. In a more command token constrained company, resurrecting or bringing back a gobbler each activation via the Breath of Makaera might not be worth it. But I think Tanan has really smartly constructed his list in a way that there is actually quite a limited way for him to utilize his massive stack of command tokens, which means that there is little opportunity cost in him constantly bringing back those annoying gobblers. Next up, I choose to move forward with one of my Warcrow units. We have messed up at some point when we are reaching this stage of the game. For whatever reason, we are thinking that we are playing the 5th turn of this round already, and we are both thinking that the round will end after this, and that's actually how we play it. In our defense, I have to say that the amount of time we were taking planning and executing our scout activations on the left flank was really dragging the game out, and in the heat of this exchange, it's possible that I might have bumped the token or the turn tracker at some point, or we have double counted something. I was extremely surprised to see that we did not play a single activation on this round when I started to put this battle report together, but hey, such is life. I'm saying this at this point to give backstory into why I move the Warc Riders the way I do. Running a Conquest 1 unit for the middle objective at this point would not be such a high priority a move if we were still going to be playing a pair of activations this round. But I'm thinking at this point that the round is about to end, so I have the opportunity to score one more military point than my opponent by running the unit to the center objective, and that's what I end up doing. I'm not feeling really confident in the way the game is developing at the moment. I feel like I'm on the back foot, and I don't feel like I'm confident in giving initiative to my opponent for a second round in a row. But at the same time, I'm thinking that if I can capture the middle objective now and bank that important military point, if I can simply hold on for towards the end of the game, that one military point mean the might mean everything between victory and defeat, or maybe a defeat and a draw. So I choose to go for the victory point solution at this point. And as already stated, we failed to play the turns 5 for both of us, thinking that we have already activated 5 times, even though that is not the case, so we proceed to the end of the round. Both the Scions and the Tribes forces have managed to hold on to their own objectives, so we are both gaining a single military point from that, and I have also managed to take up the middle point, so that's an additional military point for me. Danan is feeling really okay with the way things are proceeding at this moment, saying that okay, he's down only a single military point, but that also means that he's going to get to keep the initiative and he can force me to activate first on the next round, and that should give the all important tempo advantage to him. I'm also starting to get worried that I will not be able to out attrition Danan's force going forward, so I have to find other ways to try and bring this game back from the dangerous situation in which I feel it is as of right now. No one gets left behind moves trigger. The echoes are the unit that gets to activate at this point to move or perform a single move. They're not actually activating, as do my orc hunters with the wise mane. One of the advantages of my list construction is that my mounted wrathmane and the warg riders are so damn fast that they get excellent value out of no one gets left behind moves, so I'm able to cover a considerable amount of ground with my non-activated cavalry units at this point. The Tundra Marauders and the Anointed get to rest at this stage because neither have technically activated during this round. They don't have command tokens on them, or activation tokens on them. So both get to shed stress, and also the Tundra Marauders get to rid themselves of the all important slowed state, so they are not going to be as susceptible to attacks coming from the gobblers going forward, and also they are more maneuverable should I need them to move at a quick pace. At the start of the second round, the gobblers use their anxious mob move to reposition towards the middle of the table, as Danan is clearly thinking that that's where the main event is going to play out going forward. As Danan has forced me to go first, I need to find some good way to use this first activation. I'm not able or willing to engage any enemy units directly this round. At the beginning of this round, the orc hunters can't land a charge on anything, and I'm not willing to throw my first unit of warg riders away in a foolish charge, so I have to find some other way of making this activation work for me. I need to use some proxy bases and do some pre-measurement. since the thing that I choose to go for is to go around the lake and find a position from which I can go for the backline objective of Danan's with a cavalry model / unit should he choose to push forward with the majority of his forces. Unfortunately, my forward unit of Warc Riders, that's my first pick for this job, is unable to reach a position that would get them to the backline objective with a second activation, so I have to use my Mounted Wrath main for this. Then again, I think putting the lake between my leader and the and the leader of Tana's force, Nuada, is a pretty safe a bet. I'm not willing to duel the Elven general since I know there is only going to be a single victor in that contest. Tanan is rubbing his hands in joy, believing this to be such a suboptimal activation from my part that his position is strengthened even further. Tanan chooses to take the fight to the centermost Warc Rider unit by charging the Gobblers and the accompanying Rumpy Ride into them. He gets really unlucky with his attack roll, however, and the plentiful amount of dice that the Warc Riders are rolling really go hot for me. With the end result that I only suffer a single wound on my Warc Riders, while the double orange that I'm rolling in return inflicts 2 wounds on the Gobblers, which all importantly means that I actually win the combat, causing a point of stress on the attacker instead of suffering one myself. This is obviously quite disappointing for Tanan, but not the end of the world, and he chooses to activate the Breath of Makaera again to bring back yet another Gobbler. Only 6 more command tokens to go. Oh, sigh. I think this roll is one of the reasons why I think there is quite decent value to be had at least occasionally in the Warc Riders. They are rolling such a high amount of dice that if you get a bit lucky, they can really do a number on the enemy even on the defensive, but at the same time dice rolls are dice rolls and they can go either way, I'm afraid. The Redcaps were able to secure the center point during their last activation thanks to having such a high conquest value and the Warc Riders simply having a single point of conquest to their name. So I choose to drive back the Redcaps by activating the Wargs at this point. They actually do quite a number on the tiny creatures they are facing, thanks to the fact that Wargs gives them 2 rerolls on their attack dice, so I'm able to bypass tiny once again, and as Tanan is rolling pretty poorly on his defense roll, the Gobblers are starting to feel like an endangered species at this point. With me pushing back the surviving Redcaps, the Northern Tribes re-secure the middle point. Tanan says that he's feeling that I'm running out of steam and having to use a activation to retake the central line does put him ahead when it comes to the activation tempo going forward. For Tanan's activation on turn 7, he chooses to go extremely aggressive, and this is something that when we were exchanging notes after the battle for the purposes of this report, he was patting himself in the back, saying that this was an excellent move from his own part, and I do concur that this is somewhat surprising to me. By advancing the echoes forward using their high speed, Tanan is now able to drop a immovable Conquest 3 unit with a recursion mechanic and a whole bunch of wounds and an excellent defensive roll to the middle objective. This means that going forward I will struggle mightily to recapture middle, should that be what I want to be going for. But at the same time, one of the reasons why I felt this was surprising was that Danan is now leaving his backline extremely open. Only units capable of really defending his backline at this moment is Nuada and the Anointed, and I suspect they are not going to be staying there forever. So while I do agree that this does put quite a pressure on me going forward, and many of my subsequent activations have to be reactions on what Danan is doing here, the overtly aggressive nature of this move also means that now there is a clear path for me forward in this game where I can go back cap Danan's objectives and try and win the game that way. Danan has also been playing really tight a game in that he's not giving me any soft targets to use any high value activations on. I would even go as far as to say that his company does not include any soft targets. He has 4 tactical elements that are extremely durable and dangerous and high morale, so leaving a dent on them in damage or morale sense is going to be exceedingly difficult. After taking a long look at the battlefield and fearing that at the end of the day the situation is turning sour for me by the minute, I decide that maybe the best way to add some pressure going forward is to threaten Danan with me taking my bounty point by killing the needle. And killing the needle will require me to first get rid of one of the echoes and then to kill the needle after. So what I choose to do is to charge my mounted Wrathmane into the echoes. My thinking here is that what I want to do is to inflict enough wounds on the first echo in order to make a second attack on them dangerous enough that it could, in the very best of circumstances, take out the needle, or maybe at least force Danan to use an activation on recuperating a echo at some point, and thus slowing down the tempo of the game so as to be more advantageous for me. I'm not seeing really good reasons for me to hold on to my command tokens at this point either, so I choose to use the Wrath Roar on the echoes to crowd control them and make them way less dangerous for me going forward. Danan feels really confident that he has me in the ropes as of this activation. Knowing that he has the upper hand when it comes to melee damage potential of our high-end units, Danan pushes forward fearlessly with Nuada, and the Anointed choose to accompany him as always. This means that my mounted Wrathmane is very much in the endangered species list as of right now, and I really need to evacuate him pronto or things could really go wrong for me from here on out. At the same time, as you can see from the map on the left there, the backline of Danas is completely open right now. So as long as I can somehow hold out in the rest of the field, I should be quite easily able to capture his backline objective going forward from here. At this stage, I really have no choice but to evacuate the Wrathmane, and how I choose to go about this is by attacking the echoes as to put a point of stress on them, and then retreating away with my second short action by declaring a move. Here the extremely high mobility of the mounted Wrathmane is once again helping me out. I'm able to move into a position in which Nuada is going to be unable to attack me. My fear at this point is that Tanan might simply use Nuada to move next to my Wrath main and then use the place ability on the Anointed to tie him down. But at this point, that's something that I have to be willing to accept should things come down to that. And I'm still really much of the feeling that okay, if Tanan manages to get Nuada to my Mounted Wrath main, taking the Mounted Wrath main out is going to be a tall order with my War Chieftain rocking elite, high defense roll and 6 wounds. So if Tanan spends all that time engaging my Wrath main, I should be able to do something of consequence otherwhere on the field of battle. I also choose the Wrath Roar at Nuada. I really much consider whether this is going to be worth it, since the Elven General always has the access to the Liquid Orichalcum ability, which is a command skill that allows him to shed all his stress and shed all the states that he is suffering from. But I really want to try and force Tanan to use Liquid Orichalcum for the first time as early as possible, because this will cause 2 points of tinge on Nuada, and henceforth he will be rolling for the effects of tinge at the end of each round, as well as when using Liquid Orichalcum, and there is the possibility of him suffering from the slowed state as a result of tinge's effects, and that might really throw a spanner in the works for whatever Tanan is planning going forward. At this point, Tanan is almost jubilant on what he considers to be suboptimal or forced activations from my part. While I agree that I am most definitely on the back foot when it comes to playing the grand strategic game when it comes to this battle, at the same time I'm not so much feeling like I'm getting pushed more and more behind by every activation. I more feel that I am that one activation behind at all times, and I am working to overcome that deficit with my activations, and Tanan is very skillfully keeping himself in a position as to not allow me to recuperate that one activation that I feel like I am behind him. For Tanan's turn 9 activation, Nuada dashes forward, going after my Wrath main, and instead runs for my secondary objective, and then as always the Anointed plays next to him. We actually end up playing this wrong in the moment, with Tanan capturing my objective with the Anointed, while in truth they would have been unable to do so because they were not the unit activating, but Nuada was, and Nuada actually doesn't reach the capture circle. But in the end this does not end up mattering for the scoring of this round, so all is good. For my last activation of the round, I make the big scenario play that has been opened to me by the extremely aggressive approach that Tanan has taken, and my last surviving Tundra Marauder accompanies the Hersir on a move and a Snow Leopard tattoo plays to the backline objective. In Consolidated Progress, the backline objective is the more important one, since you can both deny the opponent from getting their military point from securing or having defended both of their objectives against the enemy, as well as securing an additional military point for capturing your opponent's backline objective. So the frontline objective actually is of no importance if you can capture the backline one, so I'm getting a 2-for-1 type of deal going here. This is pretty much the only critique that I have of Tanan's company construction choices. With so limited tactical elements, and I would even consider the Nuada plus the Anointed combination to be a single tactical element since they are always moving together. It's hard for Danaan's company to cost effectively guard its backline objectives, so I'm able to use a single activation to get what I'm going for over here, and that's high value for me. If I had access to an ambusher unit that could do this while also attacking at the same time, like let's say Celica, this would be even more valuable an activation for me, but alas, that's not the case. Unfortunately, there is nothing that I can do to stop Danaan from returning the favor. Nuada advances to my capture circle, and by placing the Anointed there with the Guardians of the Family, he's able to capture my backline objective. So we are going to the last round from a position of tie essentially. Danaan is feeling very confident that the game is breaking his way at this point. At the end of the round, Danaan will be securing 2 military points for the Scions, thanks to the fact that he has captured my backline objective and he has captured the middle objective, while I will be getting a single point for capturing Danaan's backline objective. Neither of us will be getting the defensive military points since neither of us, as you can clearly see, has been able to keep the other away from our friendly objectives. There are plenty of no one gets left behind moves for the Northern Tribes to perform. My second unit of Warc Riders makes it towards the middle of the table while maintaining a position from which I can return them to recapture my backline objectives should that become available later on. My Dark Masters Orc Hunters start to shift right towards the middle of the table, and my Wise Men's Orc Hunters want to put as much distance between themselves and Nuada as possible, since there is no world where I feel confident in engaging Nuada there in the back line and hoping to come out victorious. I also want to get Danaan's bounty away from him if that's in any way possible. The Anointed are once again able to rest, shedding all the stress accumulated so far in the game, and this is really powerful a combination that's doing a lot of work for Danaan again. At the start of round 3, Danaan is looking to constrain my options by having the Gobblers displace into melee with the Warc Riders via Anxious Mob. With me finally getting the initiative for the last round, I choose to go first, thinking that I need to set the conditions for Danaan to have to respond to my actions during the last round rather than the other way around. And here I see a move that will achieve several of my short-term goals in the same activation. So what I choose to do is to charge my Orc Hunters to the middle of the table. This achieves several things at once. First, it puts as much distance between the Orc Hunters and more importantly the Wise Mane and Nuada hunting him down. So that should make cashing in the bounty more difficult for Danaan. Secondly, this gets more conquest to the middle of the table going forward, since I'm able to place my Orc Hunter leader in the capture circle, so that's 2 conquest worth of more orcs to the middle objective. Actually, with 2 units of Warc Riders, this is enough to flip the objective in my favor away from the Science forces for the time being. The third thing that this move achieves is that it softens up the echoes going forward. I inflict the all-important vulnerable state upon them, and I strip some wounds away from them, once again threatening Tanan with the chance that I might be able to take out the needle eventually if he's not willing to try and defuse that situation going forward. Tanan pretty much has to spend his turn 11 activation to reposition Nuada and the Anointed, and this I feel is where I get some of the tempo back going forward. I feel more neck in neck when it comes to activation economy at this stage. Yes, Nuada is now in the middle of everything and there is no hiding from him going forward, but other than that the situation seems to be pretty much in the air at this point, so I still feel like I have a chance of bringing this game back under my control with the last few activations. Wanting to put even more pressure on Tanan, I choose to attack the echoes with my orc hunters yet again, thinking that this is a chance to force Tanan to activate the unit if I can bring one of them down. And I succeed at this, meaning that should I be able to take out yet another member of the unit, that member would have to be the support character Needle, and that would give me the bounty. This means that I am looking to force Tanan to activate the echoes next. Tanan, knowing what's about to happen, chooses to wisely, I think, activate the echoes. But there is the small matter of having to pass the willpower roll on the needle in order to get assembled bodies through, and actually he fails this about 77% chance of rolling a success on a orange and a yellow dice, and no echoes are brought back. I think that this actually tilts Tanan a bit, because here he makes what I consider to be the only real mistake of his during the entire game, and that is that even despite failing at this roll, he still chooses to attack the orc hunters. And why I feel this is a mistake is that it allows me to spend my last command token in order to use the Voice of Experience ability on the Wise Main to fix my green dice into a double block. So I go into the defense roll with a triple block under my belt, and I roll yet another on my black dice. And this means that I'm now able to cause several wounds thanks to the Orc Hunter's defensive switch on the needle, softening her up for destruction by my Wrath Main on my next activation. So even though, yes, Tanan manages to maybe take out a single Orc Hunter, this attack was by no means worthwhile, since now I have the needle's number. I think the right play here would have been simply to not attack, to make sure that the needle is as difficult to kill as possible. I don't remember how many wounds exactly the unit had taken before the Orc Hunters used their switch, but in the echoes, the needle has, I think it's 5 wounds to chew through before I can get her. So engaging her without the softening done by the defensive switch of the Orc Hunters would have been extremely dangerous a proposition. There is nothing to it but my glorious leader to go balls to the wall and see what happens. There are only a handful of activations left, and I feel that if I can now get a scenario play, or rather feat play advantage under my belt, there just might not be enough time for Tanan to recuperate the situation. So I choose to take a risk and charge the mounted Wrath Main into the echoes. Thanks to charge, the excellent damage output that on average the the Wrathman is able to execute, and also we are adding even more of a success through his push modifier, I am able to take out the needle. And this is important because that scores me my bounty going forward, so that's one arcane point in the bank, but it also reduces the conquest value of the remaining echo, which means that I should be able to pressure the center objective more easily going forward. Now I'm simply hoping and praying that the mounted Wrathmane can take whatever Nuada is going to be throwing back at him. Both players can sense that the end is nigh, and now it's important to get every last activation right. Luckily for me, I was able to position my mounted Wrathmane when he was charging in a way that there was no clear charge lane for Nuada left to engage him with. This is due to the copious amounts of models now swarming the middle of the table. And while this meant that Tanan could not charge me, he could still assault, and that's what Nuada does in order to start chipping away at the mounted Wrathmane. At such a large amount of defensive dice, elite and 6 wounds, it's not realistic for Nuada to take down, even for Nuada to take down the mounted Wrathmane in one go, so Tanan chooses to start the process in earnest. He chooses to have the Anointed follow along by using their Guardians of the Family ability, which puts the onus on me to choose whether to perform an opportunity attack with my Wark Riders or not. In the end, I decide to go for it, thinking that okay, I'm not going to be activating my Wark Riders so many times anyway as to have this opportunity attack constrain my options. But in the end, obviously inflicting any meaningful damage at the Anointed at this stage of the game is pretty much an impossibility, so I might just not have made this one looking back at things. Or I should not have done the opportunity attack looking back at things. But the way more impactful attack happens when Nuada gets to roll against my mounted Wrathmane. He did trigger Liquid Orichalcum to remove stress and, more importantly, the states that he was suffering from, so no disarmed for him, unfortunately, from my point of view. But even without disarmed, Nuada rolls poorly, and in reverse, the mounted Wrathmane rolls rather well, and I only suffer a single wound as a result. This is extremely great an outcome for me, since now taking out the Wrathmane with a single activation is going to require some hot rolling from Tanan, so I'm feeling that okay, now the battle is very much hanging in the balance and either one of us can still win the day. For my second to last activation, my options are starting to feel rather constrained. The mounted Wrathmane and the Orc Hunters accompanied by the Wisemane are full on stress and they are engaged, so no resting for them, so I pretty much have to pick either of my Wark Rider units or one of my Scout units to activate at this stage. While I have managed to reduce the amount of conquest Tanan has access to in the middle of the table, I have not yet captured the middle objective itself, so I choose to try and apply some more scenario play pressure by doing just that. My frontline unit of Wark Riders attacks the Gobblers they are engaged with, and thanks to the special rule Warks, they managed to do quite a number on them, tearing apart the last of the Gobblers and driving the Rumpy right back. This allows me to secure the center objective for me for the time being, and I still have one short action for the Warc Riders to do, and I decide to move them in a way as to block the line of sight from my backmost unit of Warc Riders to anything of Tanan's as of right now. The thinking behind this move being that if I can deny line of sight to my own unit, then bloodlust will not be a consideration for my last activation, and I am still wanting to keep the option open for me to rush my backmost unit of Warc Riders to recapture my own backline objective. Here is actually where the miss capturing of my frontline objective would have been important, because had we known that that objective should not be in Tanan's hands as of this point right now, my backline objective would actually be worth 2 military points effectively, so that might have changed the calculus on what to do going forward, but hey, let's play with the cards we have in front of us right now. Speaking of getting things wrong, we actually mess up during this activation also, but hey, such is life. Tanan charges Rumpy Ride at my frontline Warc Rider unit, and then he uses Breath of Makaera once again to respawn the Gobblers in the middle objectives control area so as to recapture it once more. The Rumpy Ride starts by inflicting 2 unblocked successes with his charge attack roll, which would have meant that the red cap officer would have won the combat and been able to push back my Warc Riders away from the capture circle. Since the leader is the Warc Rider positioned closer to the photographer in the photo before you. But for whatever reason, Tanan chooses to get greedy, and he re-rolls the triple orange attack dice, managing to produce 3 damage. And 3 damage is actually enough to kill off the Warc Rider because the unit had suffered a single wound previously. This is where we make the mistake of removing the model that was engaged with the Rumpy Ride, where in fact, yes, we should have removed this model, but then replaced the model with my Warc Rider leader. In the end, I don't think this would have mattered all that much, since even had the Rumpy Ride been able to then proceed to find a direction into which he could have pushed the Warc Rider leader in order to get it out of the middle zone, it still would not have changed the calculus of who controls the middle going forward, since I still would have had 3 conquest worth of models in the middle, and Tanan would have had 3 conquest points of models there also. What the movement of my Warc Rider would have meant, however, would have been that the side of the objective that's now closest to the camera would have been more accessible to Tanan during his last activation, but more on that soon enough. Okay, and this is a moment, the moment when the accumulation of mistakes made so far comes home to roost. I choose to have my Orc Hunters with the Dark Master advance to the center capture circle, since in the game state that we were playing, there was no way for Tanan to get any additional conquest onto the zone afterwards, essentially. So this move in our minds is very much locking the center objective for me. Had the Warcrider being positioned correctly, then the right hand flank of the objective capture circle would have been open for Danan to access, and this would have changed my calculus. But at the same time, had the frontline objective, Northern Tribes objective, not been captured by the Scions forces, that would also have made it possible for my back Warcrider unit by passing a willpower test to capture my back objective, and thus I would have been potentially able to score 2 or have a effective score of 2 military points that way. But ifs and buts and so forward, so this is how the game will proceed. So I effectively lock down the middle objective, forcing in the game state that we are playing Danan to go for the big swing. As in any good story, all the actions, all the heroics, all the bitter defeats suffered so far have led both of us to this one last pivotal moment. Nuada gets one last chance to bring down my mounted Wrathmane, and if he succeeds, Danan will carry the day, and if he fails, the battle belongs to the Northern Tribes. So there is nothing to it but to trigger Liquid Orichalcum to shed stress one last time, and then Nuada pushes for extra performance and goes to work. My mounted Wrathmane has to sacrifice one of his dice, thanks to being engaged by several enemy units at once, but this is of no consequence to the end result, since I have an orange dice of retaliatory potential that I don't need right now, so that's the one to go. So I get to roll my triple blue and my green dice to try and fend off the one last assassination attempt coming my leader's way. The 3 people present, me, Danan, and our friend who is learning the ropes, crowd over the dice tray. Danan picks up his dice first and lets them fly, and this is what we see. That, my fellow friends and travelers, is a 8 effective damage worth of different types of hits, successes, and damage coming from Nuada to my mounted Wrathmane. And at this point I have a terrible sinking feeling in my stomach. It's pretty much over. I was banking on Danan not rolling great, and he has managed without a reroll, since he has access to none, to roll the absolute highest damage potential possible for Nuada. Since I can only afford to suffer 4 wounds if I want my mounted Wrathmane to survive, I would now need to roll no less than 4 blocks on my triple blue and single green in order to succeed. This means that out of all the dice that I'm about to roll, my victory would rest on me missing no more than a single potential block out of all the dice facing possibilities out there. So with great resignation to the fact that Danan was finally able to outplay me and carry the day, I pick up my dice, shake them violently, and throw them onto the table. Woo! None of us can believe that. Everybody is shouting, laughing, pointing, and this is just a perfect way for the game to end from my point of view, obviously, but it's also the ultimate story now, is it not? The last die roll of the game against all the odds decides that the world spirit has seen what the Northern Tribes have had to offer today, and it is satisfied, and it is willing to provide me with a victory that to many in many ways I feel I did not necessarily deserve. But hey, Danan was rolling hot in the end, I was rolling hot in the end, and our hotness cancelled each other out, so to speak. There is little left to do except to tally up the victory points and put this one into the books. Both the Northern Tribes and the Scions forces are able to secure the opposing backline objective, so both of us will get a military point for that. Neither of us will get the military point for defending our objectives against the enemy for obvious reasons, and the last military point to be awarded comes from controlling the middle, and thanks to the last ditch dash of my orc hunters, I'm able to secure a second military point from there. Technically, the feat part of this adventure would only be scored at the end of the adventure, so technically I get my arcane point for bounty now, but I have been visually representing that point from the moment that I was able to take out the needle in order to keep the audience on board what's the total situation of the adventure. My probably rather profoundly bleeding mounted Wrathmane is still standing, so I get an arcane point from having my leader alive at the end of the game, and Nuada probably hasn't broken sweat and no hair on his head has been hurt as of right now, so Tanan also gets an arcane point from there. Facing Nuada in this particular feat is extremely demanding a circumstance for any company, I suspect. So I will have to be taking for him going forward, trying to build combinations that could reliably take him out in one go, since chipping him down is not an option thanks to Liquid Orichalcum. At the end of the day, the Scions of Yaldabaoth that have pressured me pretty much non-stop from the middle point or the second round forward, I should say, end up with 4 military points and a single arcane point for a total victory point tally of 5, and the Northern Tribes are able to persist and luck out in the end, which means that I will get 5 military points and 2 arcane points for a total of 7 victory points. This is actually the first time that we were playing that the end result in tournament points would have been supremacy versus bitter defeat, since the Northern Tribes were able to get both more military points and more arcane points during this game. But to be totally honest, it really does not feel like that. This was extremely closely fought a game. This felt like chess match of epic proportions, and I was on the back foot pretty much the whole time. Not counting that single mistake when it came to attacking with the echoes, I feel that Tanan played pretty much perfect a game considering the way things turned out. Obviously, we made a couple of important mistakes, but we lived in a shared reality where those mistakes were the reality for both of us, so I don't think there was that much of an advantage for either of us. Maybe one day we will play a flawless game of Warcrow, but that day was not again this day. Some final thoughts from the participants then. We had a long talk with Tanan after and exchanged messages regarding this battle report as is usual, and here are some of the things that he wanted to air afterwards. Tanan also felt that he was dominating especially the latter half of the game, and he was on the driver's seat, but in the end things turned sour for him at the 11th hour. Tanan also feels, as do I, that this adventure was more well balanced than the previous two from the Interplanetarian that we had been testing out. This one had more urgency for both of us to advance and try and capture points on the field, which encourages maneuver, but at the same time there was a strong element of the decapitation that we had to both worry about, which constrained our resources and opened additional plays for both of us. So this was a enjoyable an adventure for both of us. Tanan was really happy with the list he had constructed, and I have to concur that this list feels frighteningly powerful. The amount of hitting power, the amount of morale, the amount of durability, and the amount of recursion mechanics that this company includes, not to mention usually getting the advantage when it comes time to roll for initiative, thanks to a hegemony of Ember Sigian amount of command tokens, means that this list is a force to be reckoned with. As already stated during the game, pretty much the only knock on this company, this style of company from my point of view at least, is the fact that there is a limited amount of tactical elements which can open up outflanking and especially outscoring options against this type of company in adventures, or rather in scenarios usually, that include a large geographical area of engagement with several points of interest to hold at any given time. Tanan was also feeling that he was able to force me to do what he considers to be suboptimal activations time and time again, and that's something that he was really happy with. As already stated previously, I don't necessarily feel that I was forced to do suboptimal activations over and over, but rather that I was most of the time an activation or at least half an activation behind, and I had to try and recuperate that disadvantage, and it came down to the very end whether I could actually manage that or not. From my point of view, I would also like to congratulate Tanan. I really feel that he is finding his mojo when it comes to building lists and playing Warcrow, and it would appear that there is something salvageable for him in the Scions of Yaldabaoth, even though he felt really down on them previously. When it comes to my own performance today, I feel that my list was outmatched. This was bad a matchup for the list that I was trying to figure out and trying to test out. I don't think this is the best adventure for them either, since having to run the Mounted Wrathmane solo did not feel optimal, and it was not what this list I think wants to do most of the time. But at the same time, I was now finally able to field 2 units of Warcriders and the Mounted Wrathmane, so the maximum amount of cavalry that a Northern Tribes force can put out there, and I like the way they play. The amount of mobility, including the extremely high no one gets left behind move mobility that this list can make use of, really allows it to dictate where and how fighting happens, and the Warcriders are great both on the offensive and on the defensive. Then again, there are things that I don't love about them. They are a bit expensive for how hard they hit in my mind. They have a limited amount of attachment options and support options available for them, and Bloodlust throws a spanner in the works for any units working without the Mounted Wrathmane when it comes to those all-important scenario or maneuver plays. This game also very much validated how I feel about the Mounted Wrathmane. He is not so much a frontline damage dealer, at least not against the most tough of opponents, but rather he is extremely tanky and maneuverable a piece, and I think that when used right, he has the potential to bypass the enemy front line using his maneuverability or the switches available, and then assassinate important targets in the back line, while at the same time proving difficult to deal with. I think Wrath Roar is quite great an ability, and I really do enjoy using it quite a lot. I feel that I'm going to be migrating back into more infantry focused companies going forward, but there is something there when it comes to the Warg Rider centric playstyle, and I may have to return to the subject at some point. Thank you for accompanying me and Tanan on this journey. This was a wild one. Hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you again soon, fellow travelers. Safe travels, everyone.